Welcome to Encounter, where we celebrate putting faith into action and community leaders who live out compassion, grace, and love. We're a program of the Broome County Council of Churches that addresses food insecurity through CHOW and the Greater Good Grocery, provides hospital and jail ministry, builds wheelchair ramps, and assists neighbors with transportation and shopping services through Faith in Action volunteers. We invite you to the conversation. Encounter your neighbors as we learn to walk together in love and kindness.
Good morning and welcome to Encounter. I'm your host today, Joe Sellepack, Executive Director at the Broome County Council of Churches. There are always mentors in our lives, and one of my mentors was my pastor when I was growing up. He's the one that actually convinced me that I was going to go into ministry, and as a result of the call that I experienced, both from God as well as being affirmed by people, I became a minister in the church. And all of us have these types of friends in our lives who've come alongside of us and helped mentor and guide us. And ministers are no different. And to help me talk a little bit about how mentors have impacted our lives is Jeff Kellam. Jeff is one of our hosts, and he is a good friend, and you've been a very close mentor of mine as well as we've gone through all this work being hosts of Encounter. So I don't know if people know this, but Jeff called me up on the phone, and he said I'd like to talk to you about Encounter sometime, because I was involved in radio ministry for a long time, and he had some advice for me, and as a result of him giving me some advice, I recruited him to be a host. So,
and I've never given advice since then.
Yeah, how long has it been, Jeff?
I don't know.
Oh, it's been over 10 years.
Sure, yeah. Easily 10 years, yeah.
So,
and, the other thing about our mentors is that you look back and you realize you've got gratitude for these folks.
You do.
Who touched your life decades ago sometimes.
Yeah.
And you still remember them. You still remember, maybe it wasn't advice, maybe it was a role model.
Yeah.
The other thing is, and the challenge for those who are listening in on this conversation, is to think, now, how am I a mentor to someone? How am I a teacher or an influencer,
Yeah.
To kind of get us started, in 2011, I think it was, during Lent, I decided a theme for my blog, Peace, Grace, and Jazz, is the name of the blog. I would write about the 40 people who influenced my life in a positive way. So I wrote one a day during Lent.
Right.
Well, and I didn't make a list. I just thought, well, today's Tuesday in Lent, I'll write about so-and-so. Well, it was easy to find 40 people, and I could have found 40 more probably.
Yeah.
But I went through them last night in preparation for today to see how many I could fit in.
Oh, wow.
Well, we'll get to 2 or 3, but why don't you start? Who's the influence on your life that you think of first?
Well, so outside of my family and the minister who I referred to earlier, one of the folks that really meant a lot to me was one of my theology professors, Bob Lyon. Bob was actually a New Testament scholar, and he went to Cambridge, and he was a very smart man. But Bob, whenever I would call him Dr. Lyon, he would look at me and say, "Okay, Esquire, Sellepack," he had, or Right Reverend or something like that, because he was very down to earth, and he really didn't care for ecclesiastical titles as much as what he wanted to actually have a relationship with somebody. And he's the one that signed all of his letters with the peace and towels on the bottom of it. And so when I first came on at the Council of Churches, I picked that up, and I was using peace and towels. And so people would always ask me, "Well, where did you get that from?" And I said, "Well, really from Bob, but for Bob it came from John 17, when Jesus is putting a towel around himself and serving someone, and then washing the disciples' feet. And this peace in towels became part of what Bob was seeing as very basic to his ministry. And in a lot of ways, that's kind of influenced me even today. I view my work as a peacekeeper, somebody who creates peace, but also and creates bridges between people, a reconciler, as well as a person who is a servant. And I view that very, very seriously in my ministry. Yeah. How about you?
Well, I brought a couple of commentaries written by some of my seminary professors, a couple of professors. I might mention them a little bit later, but I want to start with Mabel Beach.
Oh, wow.
The Beaches, Harry and Mabel Beach, had a bicycle shop in the Union District of Endicott, which is now Babcock's Bikes.
Oh, wow.
And Mrs. Beach was kind of a pillar. Well, they were both pillars of the Union Presbyterian Church, where I serve as a volunteer. And I never had her for Sunday school. She tried to recruit me for the youth choir. My voice was changing. I didn't want to do that. But through my junior high school and high school years, she was always there. She was very evangelical in her background, spoke much more religiously than I do. I mean, her vocabulary was very Jesus-oriented. The Lord will do this, the Lord will do that. But as I went to college, having a call to ministry, she would write me letters, and she sent me $5 once and said, "I know the college food isn't very good, so go buy a good dinner." And that back in the day, for $5 you could buy a good dinner.
Yeah.
So I flunked out. I was fooling around with extracurriculars, and I thought, I've got to go tell Mrs. Beach now, and this is going to be hard. So I knocked on her door, and her response was, "If the Lord wants you to be in the ministry, then you'll make it into the ministry, and you'll be fine. So you take the semester off, and you'll go back." And very encouraging. So her letters of encouragement, her words of encouragement, although she wasn't a direct teacher, Mabel Beach is one that I would look at as a mentor in the faith in the most basic ways.
Yeah, and it's important for us to have these folks in our lives. I mean, I think about the church, because we all come from congregations, and these congregations have mixed bags, right? So, as a minister, you're looking at it from this perspective of what's missing or what's different. What do you need? All that kind of thing. Like how do we move forward and all the rest of it. But one of the biggest parts of ministry is actually honing these relationships, right?
Yeah,
so
right.
you end up with Mrs. Beach coming into your life at a very important time in your life, and she then influences you, and those moments are holy and they're gracious.
Yeah.
And
later in life, she said, "Jeff, I want you to do my funeral."
Oh yeah.
And so I did, and she was very proud of the fact that I was going to the ministry, and then the year behind me, 2 other people from the church went into the ministry, including her daughter. So important influence.
Yeah. And now, and when you started going in through seminary, you probably had some folks who were mentors and guides at that point, right?
Yeah, and one started before seminary. A seminary professor, Robert White Kirkpatrick, called me in my senior year in college and said, "If you come to Union Seminary in Richmond, we have a work scholarship for you on our radio station."
Oh, wow.
Well,
that's pretty cool.
That sold it. And so Dr. Kirkpatrick was the professor of homiletics and speech. He, through his youth and younger adult years, had a stutter, which he was able to overcome. There were times when you could see his lips kind of stutter a little bit, but he got the voice out. So how ironic he would become a speech professor. He also founded the campus radio station, which was, at the time was a 16,000 watt FM station, not at 88.1, but up at 106.5. And he wanted to train ministers to speak distinctly and in a friendly way as if one-on-one.
Right.
He also taught a class in radio and TV, and every student had to make a 30-second radio spot and a 30-second TV spot, so you could take the gospel and hone it down into a 30-second message. So obviously, that was a terrific influence on my life. He also secured for me, while other students in their first summer of seminary were going off to churches, he found from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which was brand new at that time, an internship at a local TV station.
Oh, wow.
So I was running the cameras and directing a program. And
That's pretty
again,
cool.
for a year I worked at that station, and well, here we are.
Here we are in the
Yeah.
station still.
So that's another mentor, Robert White Kirkpatrick.
Yeah. When I was in college, there was I went to college in Australia, and that was one of the places where I started feeling a call to ministry. I was asked to help lead a worship service at the for our college, and then afterwards the principal came up to me and said, "Joe, I think God is calling you into the ministry." This was all after me trying to deal with this whole thing when I was a youth and all the rest of that kind of thing, and then there was a group of us who ended up going to hear Tony Campolo speak, and I was standing in line behind. I didn't know him from anything. I was 19 years old.
Yeah, but what a dynamic guy.
So I'm standing behind this old guy, bald, and I'm behind him in line for a water fountain, and he's drinking from the water fountain, and then he turns around and he says, "Oh, there's somebody in line behind me," and I go, "Yeah," and he starts talking with me, and he goes, "You're not Australian," and I go, "No, of course I'm not," and he goes, "And so how did you get here?" and all the rest of that kind of stuff, and I told him my father was an engineer with Ford Motor Company, that I was there studying at Kingsley College, and I'm here trying to figure out what to do with my life, and so we get in this conversation, then everything is done, and so during his talk he then starts talking about how much it costs to raise a child.
Yeah.
And he says that it cost $150,000 to raise a child, and it's a lot of money. He said, but in an agrarian society, there was a value added by children, and all this, if you lived in an agrarian society, children would collect eggs, and they would weed, and there are all these things that kind of go along with that. And so he says, but now we're in an industrial society. It costs $150,000, and I looked it up here recently because I was trying to talk to somebody about my call to ministry. $150,000 when I was in college is equivalent to $500,000 today. That's how much it costs to raise a child. And so then I'm in the audience, and he says, "Joe Sellepack, you are a leech. You are a liability on your family." And he just goes down this whole thing, and I'm sitting there looking at him going,
scared to death.
Where is this going?
Right.
And then he looks at me and he says, and then he points his finger right at me, and he goes, "Your family has invested a lot of time, a lot of energy. God has put a lot into your life. Go out and make a difference." Wow. What else did I need to hear?
That's right, from Tony Campolo, of all people. My gosh, that's wonderful.
So it was like one of those things, and with enough influence on your life, eventually you're going to figure out what you need to do with your life, right? Yeah. So that's the reason I came here to the Council of Churches, had a lot to do with what Reverend Lefebvre, what David Wilson, and then what Tony Campolo eventually convinced me. It was a long trajectory, a lot of years involved in that, but eventually, and then Bob Lyon, of course, kind of influenced how I view ministry. Yeah. So that's how I got to where I am today. So who else
well,
do you have?
I chose, let's see, James Luther Mays is the author of the interpretation series, there it is, on the Psalms. He's also written a book called Praying the Psalms, I believe. Right. I couldn't find that one. He was a professor at Union Seminary when I was there in Richmond, not the one in New York City, but the first one in Richmond. And but I never had him for a course. But he was, obviously a well-known professor on campus. And it was only later when I left seminary and went into the ministry, and then eventually into pastoral ministry after several years in radio and TV for the Presbyterian Church. I picked up his books and started reading these psalm things. I thought, my gosh, I never thought about the Psalms as something to preach on. It was just kind of the prayer book, a song book, and then I got into the depth of the Psalms, and so I wrote him a letter and said, I just have to tell you what an influence this has been. I can't tell you the number of sermons I've written on the Psalms. And at the time, I was serving a church in Vermont where every week we sang a psalm as part of the lectionary. So he wrote me back, "Dear Jeff, thanks for your note about the psalm commentary and your ministry in Vermont. If the commentary is of use to ministers in ministry, I'm amply rewarded. I'm meant to contribute to a revival of psalmody in the church. I'm delighted to hear of a congregation with covenanter traditions who sing metrical psalms each Sunday. Marvelous. That makes a good context for preaching on the Psalms. You were good to write. Greetings to Joan. Grace and awareness of providence, Jim."
Oh, wow.
And I also have to tell you that early in my ministry, I happened to see him in the hallway of the seminary because I was still on campus. And he said, "Jeff, I want to tell you, I enjoyed your jazz show Saturday night."
Oh, wow.
And I thought, James Luther Mays likes jazz? And it turned out he was recording the programs. Later, people said, if we want to use some of these for something or other, and they said, well, there's this seminary professor who has these jazz shows on tape. So, mentor in the Psalms and very influential in my preaching, James Luther Mays.
Yeah, so as far as my preaching was concerned, I had a Clyde Fant. He was a preaching professor at Wake Forest, not one that I attended. I didn't go there, but he was at the time a religion and on the religion faculty at Stetson University, and so that's where I met him. He was on the faculty there, and I just got to talking to him, found out that he had written a book on preaching. He had edited the book on homiletics by Dietrich Bonhoeffer. There was a number of things that he had been involved in, and so then I just asked him, so Clyde, what would it take for someone like me to get mentoring and preaching from you? He said, well, just put stuff on tape, send it to me, and I'll send you tapes back. And so for an entire year, I sent him my sermons. Wow! Oh my! And then he would give me criticism, or critique, or that's good, that you did this well. This, this is how you could have shaped that a little bit different and made it a little bit better. So for an entire year, I was going back and forth with Clyde to talk about preaching. So he gave me so much. It's like one of those things where you realize now what he had to sacrifice. It really wasn't that much of a sacrifice, but what he had to do in order to do what he did. He had to listen to the ramblings of a young man. And then he also had to give constructive criticism in a way that would impact me. Yeah. And it was valuable. It was an important thing that I went through.
Now we should explain to our younger viewers and listeners what a tape is. But I remember the little tiny reels of tape that my grandmother we would send her a tape, and she'd send us a tape back long before we could just pick up the phone and call these folks or send text. So that's very wonderful. But you're right, that took him that much time. I can't imagine having that much dedication to someone and spending that amount of time to say, "This was really good, Joe. You made a good point here," or to say that was an awkward turn of a phrase or something.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was just one of those things that really impacted me, impacted my church too. Yeah. So people could understand, that I was going through I had to, I had to read his book, and I had to learn how Preaching for Today was the name of his book, and I had to kind of work through it in order to make it all work. So it was kind of fun.
I want to make it clear too that these are our mentors.
Yeah.
And I've got my list here of others. But I did a video documentary many years ago for the Presbyterian men's group in the National Church of the Presbyterian group on mentorship. And the first person we interviewed was a meat cutter at an A&P grocery store.
Yeah.
And somebody had said, he's mentoring a young man who's just gotten out of jail.
Oh, wow.
And so we went to the store, we got permission from the manager, we talked to that meat cutter, the butcher, and he talked about this young man in the neighborhood who'd fallen out of this family into a gang and has gotten in some trouble, was arrested, served some jail time. And so this man said, in our neighborhood, we are allowed to parent any kid that we see in trouble. He said, it's just expected that if you're doing something wrong, any adult in that neighborhood could be your father or your mother. So he said, I've taken this kid on as my responsibility. Then we went into the inner city, found this kid in his home, and he talked about the influence of this man who had said, you've just come out of jail, what can I do to help you? Do you need clothes? Do you need money? And he said, I want you to come to church with me. And the kid thought, I'm going to be embarrassed to go back to church. But he went. And I never heard the rest of the story. I heard the beginning of the influence of this man on this young man in the neighborhood. And then, went on to other documentaries, and I never heard the end of it. So you don't know as you mentor that this is going to be a protege who will follow you and remember you the rest of your life. Doesn't matter. It's the moment that you're offering advice or critique or comfort, moral support, or teaching. We do what we can do.
Yeah, it's funny. One of the sermons I remember from Fred Craddock was on one of those types of issues where as Ben Hooper, who is the governor of Tennessee, who grew up in a family that was a single parent family, and he then has to go to church as if he's and everybody knows he's part of a single parent family. And he said at the time in Tennessee, at the church that he went to, everybody had a word for that.
Yeah.
And so he would come in right at the end of the service, right after the service began, and he would leave before the service ended, so that he wouldn't have to deal with people.
Right.
But there was a guest preacher who came, and he said, and this young man, and he doesn't know him from Adam, but this man walks into the service, and he starts preaching, and he goes on longer, and he's riveted by what he's saying, and then he at the end of the service, people swarm, and so he can't get out. He's caught in this line of people trying to get out of the service, and this preacher, and he doesn't even know the name of the preacher. He just remembered what happened. This preacher's standing there, and he sees this young man trying to get out, and he calls him over and he says, "Young man, who's your father?" And he's going, "I don't know. I don't have a father." And he looks at him. He says, "Oh yes, you do. You have a father.
Yeah.
He's smiled at you and he's given you grace." And he said that changed his life.
Yes.
And Fred Craddock goes, "And we have that opportunity now."
Yeah.
Right. So you never know what's going to happen.
Yep.
Like Tony Campolo didn't know that what he was going to do was going to influence me that way.
No.
Your James Luther Mays didn't know that either, and we have these moments, right?
Yeah.
Which are just, they're holy moments, and they're moments when we can make a difference in someone's life, and we don't know it. If we show grace and we show love and we show compassion, and kindness to
Yep.
someone,
Yep.
you never know where that's going to lead.
And the other thing is, now I wrote to Mays and
Yeah.
thanked him.
Oh, yeah.
I wrote to George Bleasby, who was my English composition, my freshman composition teacher in college.
Right.
I didn't have a relationship with Bleasby. I didn't care for him much as a teacher. But man, I realized that he kept writing wordy. And everything I wrote wordy. And you'd have him, and I realized, my gosh, every time I write a sermon, I'm thinking what Bleasby. I wrote him a letter. He wrote me a gracious letter back and wrote a poem that he included. And
Did he critique it and say the
no,
wordy?
no, not at all, no. But the point is that if you're meant, Avery and Marsh,
Right.
who wrote contemporary Christian songs, had a song called "Love Them Now Before They've Gone Away."
Right.
Well, thank them now before they've gone away. If your mentor, the person who influenced your life in a positive way, is still around, find them and say thank you. It means everything.
Yeah, especially for those of us that are getting toward the end of our ministries even.
Yeah.
You know, Jeff, you've meant a lot to me, and I need to say that, and it's not just sappy, and it's not because you just said this.
Right.
We've been through 10 more years together.
Yeah.
Working collaboratively, collegially as encounter hosts, and right now we have, this moment, right,
Yeah.
So that we're sharing together. So I want you to know that you've meant a lot to me.
Well, and back at you, just to say that I've never seen a council of churches, and I've been in some larger cities, but I've never seen a council of churches that had the outreach and the community support of the Broome County Council of Churches.
Yeah.
And the ministries that are so wide and scattered but effective. It's an amazing thing, and I appreciate your being the captain of that ship.
Well,
Really.
it is a humbling experience, and I need you to know too that I when I became executive director at the Council of Churches, I got a team of people from the community
Sure,
who
yes.
told me I wanted them to help me figure out what does it mean to be an executive director of a Council of
Yeah,
Churches, and so
yeah.
they're the ones that did all the work for me
Yeah.
to make me who I am today.
It's working.
Well, thanks, Jeff.
You are.
Well, this was an impressive conversation, and for all of you today who are with us, who are part of our audience, I want you to know that you have the opportunity. You have these golden moments in your lives where you can influence someone else, or say thank you to someone who has influenced you. So have a great day. Be kind and generous to each other, and let's make Broome County a better place for all God's children.